United Kingdom, France, and Germany have put forward a counter proposal to US President Donald Trump's peace plan for Ukraine with a key number of changes. Sources have confirmed the validity of the draft text to CNN, which was obtained by Reuters. Now, among the key changes, it scraps the language regarding the restriction on NATO, instead stating that Ukraine joining NATO depends on the consensus of NATO members, which does not exist right now. NATO will not permanently station troops in Ukraine during peacetime, instead stationing them in neighbouring Poland. Look, my next guest is Kaja Kallas, the European Union's foreign policy chief. She told the US president's team that any plan without the backing of both Kyiv and Europe will fail. She joins me live from EU headquarters in Brussels, and it's really good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. Donald Trump has just posted on social media, quote, "Don't believe it until you see it, but something good just may be happening in Geneva," he said. What can you tell us about the latest diplomatic developments? Does this something good that Trump is referencing involve the European counterproposal to the initial, what was controversial US plan?
Well, of course, everybody wants peace. That is very, very clear, and we welcome all the efforts to achieve this peace. But we shouldn't take the focus off who doesn't want the peace, which is Russia. I mean, we haven't heard of Russia making any concessions or any concessions to be asked from Russia, because, we should be discussing on how Russia would not invade again and how Russia would stop this war, and not what Ukraine could or should give up, because there's one victim and one aggressor in this war.
Does this at least feel substantive from Europe's position? This is a US drafted 28-point plan.
But if you look at those 28-point plan, 28 points that are on this plan, it's also clear that none of these plans or points are about Russia making any concessions, which is a problem, because if you look at the history, I mean, they have invaded their neighbors many times, whereas their neighbors haven't invaded them ever. So we should move from discussing how it would be easier for Russia to invade again to discussing what should we do and what kind of concessions should Russia make in order not to invade again.
Got the bell ringing on Wall Street. Investors there will be keenly watching what is going on in Geneva at this point, as these technical teams get to work on this evolving draft, as Marco Rubio has described it. Earlier this hour, I spoke to Nigel Gould-Davis of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, and he's also the former UK ambassador to Belarus, as you'll know. Here's how he described this plan at this point.
The plan itself, I think we should describe it as sort of Frankenstein plan. It has different parts sewn together from a series of apparent conversations with some Russians, although not President Putin himself. And there are parts of that plan which seem to borrow provisions of the earlier Gaza peace agreement conducted in a very different situation. These are, to say the least, very unpromising conditions for producing something that would be acceptable to all sides.
Is that a fair assessment to your mind?
Well, this is again, the point that we should focus on what are the asks for Russia, because we want this war to stop. And the asks for Russia is, to start with, we should ask that they keep to their international agreements that they haven't so far, kept. So start from there. Also, limiting the military of Russia, limiting the military budget of Russia, so that they wouldn't be able to invade again. If we put the limitations on Ukraine, who hasn't made any invasions on their part, then Russia just gets what he wants, and then we are walking into these traps. What we have to understand right now is that although Russians want to make us believe that Ukraine is in a hurry and Russians are not, but this is actually not true. Why they're making a good face to Americans that they are open to peace again is because they are afraid of the reparations loan, I mean the Russian frozen assets to be used, and they are afraid of the sanctions because they are running out of oil revenues to fund this war. And wars also end when one party runs out of means to fund it. And that's why they are making these faces, and that's why our response should be pressure on Russia, who is the aggressor in this war.
Right, let's get some detail from you on this plan, this counter plan. A European official has confirmed to CNN that the reported text of a UK, French and German counter proposal is accurate. That text removed the US proposal's recognition of 3 eastern Ukrainian territories as de facto Russian territory, and it removed references to territorial concessions. Is there a possibility of the EU supporting a plan in any way that forces Ukraine to cede territory?
Well, what we have to understand that if Russia could conquer Ukraine, they would have already done so. So to offer them something that they even haven't conquered militarily is, offering something on top of what they already have, or what they have achieved on the battlefield, which is definitely awarding or rewarding them for the aggression, which is a very bad sign. So again,
Right.
I think we shouldn't fall into the traps to discuss all what Ukraine should give away, but bring the discussion back to the territory what Russia should concede, because they have started this war and they are doing the killing.
Okay, what about what Russia has conquered militarily?
Well, we have called, and Ukraine has agreed to unconditional ceasefire already in February this year. So, of course, there should be a ceasefire in order to start the real talks. There is clear distinction also between de jure and de facto. So one is what Ukrainians are able to conquer back, but the other one is the stalemate where the things actually stand, and not recognizing any territories or conquering of the territories de jure, because that would go
Right.
really in conflict with all the agreements that we have.
Can you confirm that all European countries are on board with this document and together? And if not, how you expect Ukraine and Russia to agree if the EU doesn't?
Well, we have on Wednesday the meeting with the foreign affairs ministers of European Union. To also steer this process back to the discussion what Russia should concede. So to really, have the approach from the European side, what we want to see from Russian side, so that this would not happen again.
So as we speak today, you can't tell me that the Europeans are speaking with one cohesive voice?
Well, in Europe, we have 27 different member states, and of course also 27 different historical backgrounds, whereas also 27 approaches when it comes to, historical background regarding Russia. So clearly, in order to rush into any agreements, we want to understand what is the price, and again, shift the focus to Russia, who is the aggressor here.
Can I ask you, have you spoken with Secretary of State Marco Rubio? If so, what's been your message to him? And it is worth noting that Europe still buys oil from Russia. If the European allies are in the talks, is this going to be one of the sticking points that the US is going to bring up time and again?
Well, President Trump gave exemption to his friend who is buying the oil from Russia, so one of the member states. Actually, I mean, it is true that it's kind of strange that we are still buying oil from Russia that is funding this war, and many member states have already ended it, whereas some haven't, and that also gives revenues for Russia, which is definitely not a good thing.
We're going to leave it there. We thank you very much indeed for your time.